Welcome back to the channel, everybody. We've got a meeting of minds, shall we say, today. I'm joined by Matthew Moss of the Armourers bench, better known as Historical Firearms. And we're joined today also by David Carson, an ex-colonel and MBE holder. We're extremely excited to have him on the channel. And he's going to be joining us talking about a film he was a historical advisor on all the way back in 1987. The film's called The Unbroken Line. And David, would you kindly give us a little bit of a synopsis of the movie?
Yeah, certainly. So actually, it was 1985. Sorry to correct you before you even started. The film came about because it was the tercentenary of a number of British Army regiments. And the film was commissioned by the Central Office of Information on behalf of the MOD. I suppose partly recruiting, but also for internal audiences to show serving soldiers something of their heritage and to make that link. And it was very much aimed at the soldier and the NCO. It wasn't a film about posh officers particularly. It was about the blokes doing their job and how that sort of strand of service, dedication, comradeship, maybe stubbornness, all those sort of traits that we all know exist today and existed then, and how that's been a sort of golden thread, I suppose. I think that was really what they were trying to get across. You know, as with all things, the budget first, I think, and foremost went on the actors and the director, and then we had to scrabble around to try and do 300 years of British history literally in 3 days. That's all we had to do it, with some soldiers from the Gloucesters, who were our infantry, and from 160 Bravo Company Royal Military Police from Aldershot, who were the last remaining mounted police unit in the UK at the time, long now sadly gone, and they were our cavalry. So yeah, it was extraordinary, really. And I sort of walked into it because I just left Morris Angels, the theatrical costumiers, helping to run their military department, and I sent out a load of letters to production companies. This is all before email and things like that, and I was more than surprised to get a phone call from a production company in London saying, "We've just been asked to make this film for the Central Office of Information on behalf of the MOD." And that was a company called Illustra. I don't even know if they exist anymore. And I was taken out to a posh lunch and asked what I could do. Well, I'm afraid I think I sort of probably made it up, but I just said I could do anything you want me to do. And so they obviously wanted a military advisor, but they hadn't got anyone else to do props, to be an armourer, to find locations, to do any of those bits. So I sort of said I could do the whole lot, so which was pretty silly, but I was 27 and young and enthusiastic and thought I could have a crack at it. So that's sort of the background, really. And Salisbury Plain was our location, and I happened to live within the sound of the guns from Lark Hill, so which rattled my windows. So I know the plain pretty well, and I'd served in the TA for 5 or 6 years by that stage, so I knew the plain intimately, and I knew how the army worked. So it was a very neat, fit, really, from all respects. So I could work with the army, I could work with the civil servants, I could work with theatrical costumiers and armourers, and I called in lots of favours. So we can talk about a bit more about those as we go on. But that's sort of it, really. Yeah.
When I found the video, I immediately sent Matt the link because I was like, "You have to check this out." I think I was
very excited. As you were saying there, David, I actually dug up some prints that I have, the Suffolks and the Anglicans.
Yep.
The Anglians, and it has 3 uniforms, 3 depictions of uniforms from 1685, Napoleonic period, and then early Cold War, and one of them is actually 1985.
Well, there you go. That was certainly the thought behind it. And I think looking at it again this afternoon, I have to say it brought back lots of memories. But you know, we'd probably do it differently today, wouldn't we? But as a piece of, as a documentary, really showing the British Army during the Cold War, because that was all very real to us. You know, it really was very real, and we were really quite ready for the Russians to, you know, swarm across Germany, and for special forces to be dropping in the UK. You know, that was what we were practicing all the time. So it was very much at the moment.
It does an interesting job of sort of like showing that the unbroken line, as it were, as it says, you know, and it shows that the soldiers throughout time, especially British soldiers, have had this sort of mentality which you know flows through over
exactly that years. And I think that was a really good concept, and I think that would hold true today. I don't think, you know, I think we can make a film today showing the soldiers who served in Iraq and Afghanistan have exactly the same traits as, you know, the soldiers that served in the trenches during the First World War, and, you know, served at Blenheim or in Normandy, or what doesn't matter. I mean, they are the same types of people. So I think
with a few tweaks to perhaps soundtrack and locations and a bigger budget, then you would probably do exactly the same thing, and it will come off just as well.
Exactly. I mean, a bigger budget would help enormously, and I can't even begin to tell you what we tried to do it on. So there were lots of shortcuts taken, and you know, looking at it now, I mentally made those comments to myself. Oh my God, you know, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do it? But I know why we didn't, because we didn't have the cash. So
right. So I think on that note, we should start watching it.
I don't know. Well, what sort of noise? It's funny, Corporal. It sounded a bit like horses. Horses? Don't be daft. Cows, maybe? Knock it off. Well, I heard something. It sounded like horses. Bloody gone.
That's 2-1 Charlie. Moving now out.
300 years ago, Daniel Defoe wrote that the poor starve, steal, or turn soldier. And yet, from those disinherited vagabonds and drifters, armies were forged which conquered the world. The soldier's values were simple: loyalty, discipline, and courage. He was stubborn, misunderstood, taken for granted, and always there when needed. 300 years later, he's still the same man, the British soldier.
Right, so there you go. That's the first couple of minutes. I want to watch the whole thing.
Well, I can just a bit of background there. So that was all filmed in a valley, a shallow valley, to the trying to think what side it was. It was to the south of Tidworth Military Cemetery. So, and that was a tenanted farm. So the barns you saw right at the end of that clip was part of a farmyard, which we took over basically. And the chickens were supplied by my brother. And needless to say, like with all animals, they didn't, you know, they disappeared. So just left them there. I think hopefully they were looked after by the farmer. And the two characters he saw talking to each other, I can't remember the name of the younger actor, but the corporal was played by an actor called Bruce Payne, who's quite well known now, worth Googling and looking up. And he went on to do quite a lot of stuff. And he appears all the way through, I think. Maybe not in the Waterloo sequence. We'll have to have a look at that. But he's certainly in the World War II one as the corporal. Yep.
Actors, did they have previous military experience, or were
no?
They just
no. So we had for the present day at the time, for the 1985 sequences, we had lots of soldiers around. So they were taken off and given a bit of basic, you know, what do you do? So in that sequence, you saw them moving back out of their positions backwards, which is the correct way of doing it, obviously keeping a low silhouette and moving back. I
do
can't
love it when
remember.
they pop up out of the grass.
Yeah, exactly.
Really good.
Those were all soldiers, the rest of them, and it was, a 432 belonging to the Gloucesters. So I think it was all very nice. They were taken in hand and just briefed on what they, for each scene, what they should and shouldn't do. When it came to the World War II bits and the Napoleonic bits, I taught. We'll talk about that later, but I taught them Napoleonic musket drill, and then I taught them how to use World War II weapons. So.
I love the bit, just the sort of how he thinks he's hearing like the echoing of the past. I really like the sort of, there's a narrative there, but then there's this overarching narrative of them being in the same area of the troops previous. I really like that. I love the narrative choices.
Yeah, well, of course it's meant to be in Germany somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the link. Yeah,
and the synthy soundtrack's just very 80s. I love it. So good.
Yeah. So that's a nice little beginning, and it's I was very pleased with that scene in the farmyard. We'll see a bit more of it in a minute, but I mean that took, we had the old tripod and the cauldron, and we had a proper fire burning, and there was there wasn't anything in it you could eat, but it was that sort of feel, and the barn inside was perfect because one of the beams had cracked, so the sort of roof was caving in. Fantastic. But it just looked, and it was it's probably a slightly later barn, to be honest. It's probably late 1700s, early 1800s, but close enough.
Great. Matt, do you want to add anything before we go on?
So when is the initial segment set? Is it Battle of Blenheim?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I had hands up. It wasn't my period, and I went and got all the costumes and stuff together, and then I should have done the research a bit more closely, because they should be wearing tricorns rather than just having one side of their hats turned up, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a little bit earlier, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The uniforms are sort of okay. Don't look too closely at the swords. And the shabraks
on like 1793.
Yeah, exactly. And the
shabraks
shabraks on the horses are the same ones we use. But there was just not enough money to hire swords for each
But
period.
to the uninitiated, someone that isn't looking for those kind of things, or you're just engrossed in the film itself, then you're not going to notice those.
No, we wanted to give a clearly different feel to Waterloo, and I think the Waterloo section. I don't want to keep jumping, but that's a bit more clearly defined.
Yeah. I think that it shows a nice it's a nice juxtapose where you see the kit the army has in 85 to the kit we started with in the 1700s. It's a real nice, to juxtapose again. It's such a nice switch. So I think we'll continue.
Aye, we could wish for some activity, sir. It defies belief that we must wait here in idleness while His Grace is even now committing lesser regiments to engagement. If he will but let us have at him, sir, we'll play a tune for those Frenchies to dance to.
Soldiers have always worked in the most violent environment known to man, the battlefield.
Aye, sir. They broke our first line of cavalry, but that sent them headlong into our foot, whom methinks are paying them handsome attention at this moment. Soon we shall charge upon command and send them all to the devil where they belong.
A soldier's loyalties are to his country, his regiment, and his comrades. He will defend them all to the death. Comradeship is the intangible link that binds the highest commander to the lowest private. At Blenheim, John, Duke of Marlborough, led a vagabond army that achieved the greatest victory that Europe had seen for 400 years. His men called him Corporal, a nickname not lightly given.
A right good day, sir. And we've Corporal John to thank for that. Corporal John, our Captain General. We call him that because he looks after his men, sir. On our march back from Flanders, he took even common soldiers into his carriage, those that succumbed to exhaustion, and procured us new boots, sir. They said it was against orders, but Corporal John did it.
The system, like society, has never been perfect.
Oh, your pardon, sir, but I'm lately come to the regiment and scarcely know the men. Yet they seem good fellows. We enjoyed most famous sport down yonder in the village against the gendarme, who scampered off with the most determined modesty. Blenheim is its name, though the men have dubbed it Blenheim. Aye, they seem good men all, yet I must perforce leave them shortly, for I'm apprised of a captaincy fallen vacant for purchase with the 21st.
So there we go, Blenheim.
Yes, Blenheim in 10 minutes or 5 minutes or, yeah. So,
but there's lots of little really interesting things in there. You know, the mention of the captain buying his captaincy in another battalion or regiment.
Yeah,
that was an interesting inclusion. Obviously something that was such a big part of the British Army for, I suppose, 200 years.
yeah. I think that was deliberate. Again, it was pointing out that officers have come and gone, and certainly up until the reforms where you actually had to earn your commission rather than pay for it, that, you know, some were very good and some were clearly not very good. And it was the soldiers and the NCOs that formed the backbone of the army. So that was the point. And the actor playing the officer was an actor called Michael Maloney, who again has become quite famous. He's done quite a lot of Shakespeare. Again, well worth Googling him. So he was a very young, up-and-coming actor, as was Bruce Payne, who appeared in that sequence. So, yeah, really interesting. And the cavalry NCO was a chap called Dallas Adams, and I did look him up today, and sadly he's no longer with us. He's passed away, but he played quite a significant part in the film all the way through.
That charge is quite magnificent.
it is.
Yeah.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah,
The charge is good. In
charging
fact,
through the smoke.
they actually jumped the cameraman.
Oh wow.
Absolutely terrified him, because that wasn't meant to happen. But yeah, they cleared the camera man and the sound man on the ground, and they came back out looking a bit ashen after that sequence.
Well, that's got to be terrifying, staring down a cavalry charge. Wow.
Yeah,
Very effective. You know, they're all there with their swords drawn through the smoke.
yeah.
great.
That's what I love.
I did notice they had all the 1796 pattern light cavalry sabers pointed as was laid down in the manual. So
Exactly.
Yeah, with the reverse grip.
I got that bit right, but the swords wouldn't have been made at that period, as we both know.
Talking of actors, the film's narrated by Ian Holm of
Yes.
Bilbo Baggins, which I thought was another odd but really, really fitting sort of addition. His narration is really, really good. Do you know anything about how he was involved?
No, I don't. And that was all post-production. So
Sure.
he didn't come to set. And I think it was a favour, possibly through the director who may have worked with him in the past. Because again, you know, it was the whole production was calling in favours from whoever, you know, was prepared to help, really.
Yeah.
So I imagine, you know, he probably waived his normal fee, because even then he was fairly well known.
Yeah. I mean, his Ash from Alien probably was his most famous role at the time, I'd assume. And then obviously he goes on to be, you know, Bilbo Baggins, and is ingrained in film history. But it's it's just amazing to see him. Hear him in this. Just wasn't expecting it. So I think now we'll go from Waterloo right up to the First World War.
The regiment is the cornerstone of the British Army. Regimental spirit is based on ideals of loyalty, comradeship, and honour. Those ideals are enshrined in a regiment's colours.
Ready! Present! Fire!
backbone of the army is the non-commissioned officer. Then, as now, he led by example.
That'll be the third assault we've repulsed today, sir. The boys are standing well. We let the Frenchies come to 20 paces sometimes before we return their salutes. They'll be damn fools, begging your pardon, sir. They keep coming against us in this manner.
The soldier at Waterloo had been taught by his non-commissioned officer to fire his cumbersome musket at the rate of 2 rounds per minute. Standing shoulder to shoulder in the square, the same NCO helped his men to maintain that rate of fire in the face of cavalry charge, musket volley, and artillery bombardment.
If a square were ever to break, God forbid, it would become of little more consequence than some Hyde Park mob. And you may wager it would present Johnny Crapo yonder with some fine sport for his cavalry. There is more, worse. For if a square were to break, the regiment that composed it might scarcely raise its head ever again.
Prepare to resist! Cavalry!
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great sequence. I want to be in that line with that sergeant. He's so it's a British Army sergeant personified, isn't it? Yeah, really. I just think it's great.
Well, it's obviously it was meant to represent a corner of a square, and we had very little time. I mean, I had to train those guys to fire brown besses, and to do all the correct loading drills. We were able to get up to the 2 rounds per minute for real. I mean, that's actually what we managed to achieve within probably half a day's training. But because, you're working with soldiers, they do what they're told and they understand orders, and they just got on with it. And they rather enjoyed, biting the cartridges off and ramming them down and doing all the stuff. It was great. I got actually told off for firing a volley when they were filming another sequence because we had to rehearse to make sure it would work. But literally, we ran from one day to the next. It was Blenheim, and then I think we had a day off, and then it was into Waterloo, and another day off, and then into the Normandy sequence. So, point of interest there: the actor playing the Dragoon officer is Christopher Good, who's best known for his portrayal of Major Carlisle in A Bridge Too Far. So, in fact, he'd already done that by that stage. So I was quite surprised to see him on set. Actually, he'd already become fairly famous.
He's really, really good in it.
Yeah, really good, and he appears later on here.
Sort of hint at the 69th losing their colours at Quatre Bras.
Yes,
I like that inclusion in the little narrative monologue. About the importance of the King's colour and how a regiment wouldn't dare show its face if they lost it again. Obviously, I think the 69th recovered theirs during the 100 Days campaign, but yeah, they famously lost theirs at Quatre Bras.
Yeah, and it was, as you say, a huge disgrace. And I think they were just trying to, the script was trying to bring that out, and the fact that, it was an officer holding the colour but being defended by NCOs. So that was, again, part of the dialogue. And that although it's an officer's job to hold the colour, he couldn't do it without support of his NCOs. Yeah.
I think as well that the talking to camera, it's quite, I wouldn't say it's not been done at this in filmmaking up to this point, but it's definitely something you'd never see again in possibly from a narrative point of view in one of these training videos. They're not, possibly not from a historical reconstruction point of view. It's very refreshing to have a soldier from the past come and talk to the viewer. Yeah. I really like that narrative choice there. I think that's why for me the film is so refreshing, because it's presented in a completely unique way to say, I don't know, pick sort of any British Army training film from the 80s. They're all very matter of fact.
Yeah, it's not like Soviet Encounter where, the narrative is driven by sort of like NCO briefings and, what's heard over the net, etc.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, Rob, because it reminds me of Peter Watkins's sort of like to camera style, with films like Culloden and things
it is
like
quite it's quite reminiscent of Culloden actually. Yeah, I hadn't made that connection till you said it, but no, that's I think that makes sense.
I think the director certainly was, had come from a very artistic theatrical background and wanted to give it a new take. And he was, a relatively young director on his way up, and I think he wanted to put his own stamp on it rather than just being yet another army public information type film.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely has a vibe that sets it apart, I think, definitely.
So now I think when we go back to watching it, I think we see some of the year 1985 troops. They bleed into the film again.
Colonel, I've got the new troops. Hello, 0. This is Mike 20. Contact 11:45 hours. Grid.
7147, a 14 BMP, a 12 at
T62. Moving west astride Route 3. I'm observing over.
Roger out. Colonel.
2 on engage out.
Lift radio silence.
Hello, companies. Romeo 2 Charlie. 6 batteries. Zulu Tango 4143. 10 round.
Tell Reckitt to withdraw the 2 forward sections now and take up their new positions on Bad Fox.
You'll see Christopher Good now is playing the present-day colonel as the commanding officer of a battalion in their command headquarters, which was built specifically for the film in a large 12 by 12 tent, I think we were in. But yeah, so he was obviously briefed before each sequence as to how to get across, the fact that he was in charge. Okay, he played a particular character, a bridge too far, but this is modern army talk, and he had to be convincing rather than looking as though he was just saying the lines without understanding what he was saying. So he had a bit of personal tuition there. But yeah, the kit was all current at the time. So I think those are Scorpions rather than Scimitars, but I get confused easily. It's the size of the barrel, isn't it? It's the gun on them. Maybe they're Scimitars. I
think the Scorpion had the low velocity.
That's right.
Wider barreled gun.
It did. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So they are 2 Scimitars, which are still in service, surprisingly. But they're they were all up for it. They were all having a great time, and it was a sort of week off work for them, but doing what they do.
Yeah.
So,
I think that he's very convincing, Christopher, in those scenes. If you'd never have told me that it was Christopher Good, I wouldn't have known. I would have thought it was a serving officer. Personally, I don't know what you think, Matt, but
he is convincing.
Yeah.
Lift radio silence, what we had on the net, he's got all the lingo down.
Definitely.
He's got the lingo. Yeah, exactly. That's right. And I think, the difference between saying the words and actually sounding as though you understand the words is the distinction. And I think he got that very well, and certainly got the briefing from the regular officers in the all on set basically throughout. So he felt happy with what he was doing, certainly.
I thought it was interesting that they're all wearing NBC kit.
I was about to
see in a lot of training films.
I was about to mention that.
Well, they were at a high state of readiness, so they were ready for whenever we went on exercise in that period. We were in NBC kit all the time, more often than not, because those were what we expected to have to wear, because we thought that the Soviets would use some nasty stuff against us. So.
I mean, they don't look very comfortable.
Absolute nightmare. And those rubber overboots, which you sort of tie up with laces, are a disaster. And you could, if you were walking on anything the least bit slippery, you just went on your backside basically. So yeah, not a great deal of fun.
No.
By 1914, the soldier was equipped with a Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle. His rate of fire was now so great that the Kaiser's armies often thought that they faced machine guns. The same discipline that held in the square now held in the trenches, though the cost was appalling.
Well, we noticed some movement in the building over there. I sent Edwards directly. Used to be Bookie's runner, so you can see around corners. I don't suppose you've seen any of that lot. We got split up. Shell fires. The radio's US. Some of the lads copped it. We're Dorset, see? Hit! Hit!
They were Jerry's, all right. Made a real mess of their tank. Killed 3, the rest are in the bag. One out for the Dorsets, right?
So there we are, from the First World War to the Second World War there.
Yeah, indeed. Well, just the only bit of live action in that First World War sequence was me demonstrating how the SMLE can be cocked at a rapid rate. And that was from my collection. I just brought that in and did a close-up on it. But the World War II, the Normandy World War II sequence, one of my favourites, I suppose, involved an awful lot of calling in favours. So all the vehicles in that sequence belonged to friends or to me. The ruined car came from a scrapyard on the edge of Salisbury Plain, 1930s car. The actual location was a place called Greenland's Camp, which is not far from the Bustard Inn on Salisbury Plain near Larkhill. And we chiselled the wall so we could drive the Hetzer through it. But yeah, I think it was I think it was a really nice sequence. The black and white fading into colour, really joins it together. And the guys were great. They were soldiers again. They just did what they were told. So they were more than happy firing the Bren. And the PIAT was an interesting one because they were playing with it before we actually filmed it, and they got it into their heads they could fire it standing up, which was quite amusing. And I did brief them very clearly that wasn't to happen. But of course, soldiers being soldiers thought they'd have a go, and the young lad who fired it, he went flying backwards, and they all thought it was extremely funny. He didn't hurt himself, but he felt a bit foolish, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, nice sequence. Anything particular you want to pick out and ask questions on, I'm happy to answer. But it was a great little sequence.
Probably let you lead off, Matt, about the PIAT, probably.
Yeah. So that was a live PIAT, was it?
It was a live PIAT, yeah.
Oh,
and that came from Baptiste in London, yeah.
Yeah.
We just fly a blank round with it, yeah.
Yeah, there's not too many of those around anymore, sadly.
No.
But I did wonder, because it's a very good it's a very good representation of how it would have been used. It's being called up. One was issued per section, I believe it was. Yeah, 3 per company, 1 per section.
Yeah.
It's a nice little scene. Resisted the urge to shout, "Bring up the PIAT!" Bridge over the bridge.
Yeah, just shouted PIAT. I thought it was nice because they called for the gun group, which was exactly right.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yeah,
two-man gun group rather than split down into fire teams as we are today.
Nice to see an L4 Bren.
Yeah, and that was all being, I have to say the World War II tactics, was still being taught. I did junior Brecon in 1982, the year of the Falklands, junior Brecon for territorial soldiers, which was a 2-week course, and we were still having a 10-man rifle section with the gun group and the 8 riflemen. That was still being taught in 1982, and it was actually because of the Falklands and the experience of the Falklands that they started to rethink that, and the fire team concept developed. So that wasn't alien to those guys particularly, in a sense. So it's really interesting that, World War II tactics were still being practiced. Whereas nowadays, they wouldn't know what you were talking about.
True,
No idea at all.
It's still fire and maneuver, but I suppose it's been broken down a little bit further than gun
Yes,
group,
indeed.
rifle group.
Indeed, exactly. Yes, it's 2 fire teams, half a section each. One commanded by the section IC, the other one commanded by the section 2 IC. So that gives you that constant 1 foot on the ground, moving forward in tactical bands. But essentially, the gun group, as you know, was there to cover the advance of the rifle section. But yeah, I think it was just a great bit of fun. It was a very tight little scene. It worked really well, and I was fortunate that I own my own Hetzer, so that gave them saved them a lot of money. They wouldn't have had a bit of World War II German armour in that if it hadn't been for the fact that I was prepared to do it, for the sake of having a low loader. And the other guys, there's a dingo in there.
Yeah, I was going to ask what that was. I couldn't quite make out what.
Yeah,
it
it's
was.
a dingo in the background and a jeep in the foreground, and they all did that for the love of it. And the reason we went for the 43rd Wessex Div, one, because it was it's a West Country regiment. A division formed of West Country regiments, so it sort of has a resonance, and also that the vehicles were predominantly marked up to that because they belonged to friends of mine, and we all marked them up the same. So we wanted to tell that story, and I think I changed the script to say, one up for the Dorsets, Yeah. And actually, I am in that scene as one of the German tank crew.
Oh, great!
You can't see me, so I'm on the ground, spread eagle.
Nice,
cool.
Love it. It's great. I think when I rewatched it earlier, I think one of the Tommies looks like he's never worn hobnails before, because he looks like he's going to go flying when he starts running in. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, those stick bayonets, they look quite dangerous now when they're flailing around with them. Oh my! But that whole section's just brilliant, isn't it, Matt? That it's really nice to see a PIAT that you've not seen on film before.
Was there a decision to include the PIAT, or was it just was it in the script already, or because obviously we weren't expecting to have an armored vehicle?
No, I think I can't remember exactly what we were going to do, but I think because they wanted to knock the tank out, the only way to knock it out was to have a PIAT. So I won't claim complete credit for it, but it's a long time ago. But I think probably that was how it evolved. Once I said I can supply a German tank destroyer.
Yeah. And
the only effective way of knocking it out without using some, artillery proper against it, which we weren't going to get hold of in a hurry, was to use the PIAT. So
it's great. Yeah, it's a great scene. I'd say it's probably one of the best depictions of a PIAT in action.
300 years after Blenheim, we have a professional army of volunteers. The battles are more complicated and the equipment more sophisticated, but the values are the same. A soldier's comrades and his regiment are as important as ever.
Jake's just copped a message on the neck. Enemy have turned up near our last position.
3 platoon will have them then.
And the Staffords have got in on the act.
Prepare to move. Move!
That's it. Nice and close. Pick a target in your own arcs. Steady. Steady. Watch and shoot.
Well, the situation now is that to our immediate front, the enemy attack has been contained. But the enemy in battalion strength is breaking through on our right. B Company are now coming under heavy attack. We are to remain firm in our position. The Brigade Reserve has been ordered to take up counter-penetration positions in B Company's area. Hell Arms Squadron has been put on immediate notice to support us. hell on.
Hello, sir. This is Tango 1-2. Enemy tanks, grid 7147. Request hell on. A contact, call sign, Oscar 30 of 12 cat. Over.
Head on task, sir. Time on target, 5-6.
Head arm on. Whistle away. Good noise, one, Archer. Don't get rattled, lads. Put your heads down.
So there you have it, the British Army on the Rhine, proving
Yep.
why, proving what they could do there.
What a sequence.
It's amazing.
It's a great sequence, and those the 4 Lynxes with the tow missiles on. Obviously, again, they were deployed to the plane. The actual firing sequence clearly wasn't where we were. All the stuff going off on the ground was, explosive packs electronically detonated, as you would expect. But I think it was really quite well linked together. It had a good feel, and I know the Army Air Corps pilots, a breed apart. They've got all the Gucci kit, the flying boots, and the nice gloves, and all the rest of it. And you saw a very distinctive sort of post Falklands tash on one of those pilots.
Oh, yes.
So he was. They rather enjoyed the fact. I think they were, being in a film. Let's put it like that. They certainly enjoyed that and chatting up all the girls on the production team. Yeah.
Flyboys, eh?
Yeah.
Was that shot, David, where they're sort of like flying over the top of the tanks? Was that done by air? Was that an aerial shot, or was that?
Yes, it was an aerial shot. Yeah, they had a helicopter in to film that. Of course, pre-drone.
Yeah.
That was the only way of doing it. So yeah, they did. They hired a chopper.
It's very Apocalypse Now. That sequence in the air there really reminds me of the Ride of the Valkyrie sequence from Apocalypse Now.
I'm just rethinking that, whether they didn't actually. I just can't remember whether they hired one in or used one. I think they used one of the Army choppers. Actually, I think they may have gone up in a Gazelle or something.
Yeah, that might make sense. Yeah,
it would have been much cheaper. I think that's what they did. Yeah, I think that's what they did. To be honest, I wasn't. I was running around trying to get the next sequence ready, so I didn't watch every single shot. So, as I said, the 1985, current serving soldier bits were predominantly just run by. We had a liaison officer from the MOD, and he dealt with the production crew and got everyone together and told them what to do. So I was having sort of not necessarily downtime, but I was either catching chickens or trying to catch chickens or trying to arrange for a low loader to offload a tank somewhere. That's sort of what I was doing if I wasn't actually on set. Yeah.
I like the part where the sergeant in the fire position with the lads with the SLRs, where he goes, "Oh, don't worry, lads, it's just noise; it can't hurt you."
Yeah.
Because for me, that echoes the NCO in the Waterloo scenes where he's telling his lads to hold steady and hold fast. It's that whole sort of look, your NCO's here; he'll help you out, he'll be with you. Don't worry. It's a really nice little inclusion. There's a lot of callbacks throughout the whole thing to previous sections, and it's only when I watched it a few times I actually realized they were there. It's a very multi-faceted movie. There's a lot of love in the production. It really seeps through there.
No, absolutely, and that was Bruce Payne playing the modern NCO, in that 1985 sequence, and he didn't appear in the Waterloo sequence, but he was in the Normandy one, and Blenheim. So again, that was the link of having the same face reappearing in different uniforms in different time frames, but essentially being that person, that the soldiers turn to in their hour of need, somebody who would reassure them and, be a father, a brother, and, a cross dad sometimes. Yeah.
I liked, we've spoken about the fairly magnificent scenes with the Lynxes, but we have those nice little inclusions of like the GPMG and the sustained fire roll.
Yeah,
running through a belt, and I think there's a line in the dugout where he's, he, as he's ordering to open fire, he's like watch and shoot, which is something I normally like sort of associate with fire range drills, that kind of thing.
It's very much one of the fire control orders that are given to the rifleman when you're in that situation. Watch and shoot is normally given, either during an attack or defense or on an ambush, for instance. Once you've sprung the ambush and it's all silent before the ambush is sprung, and then there'll be watch and shoot afterwards to try and pin down any survivors. But nice touches, as you say, absolutely. Yeah. I wish they got a Jimpy firing a live belt rather than a blank belt. That was the only thing.
And it was out in the open as well, which if you think about it, probably wouldn't have been out in the open.
Well, they wanted to massacre those Russian troops coming through that clearing, didn't they?
Well, they were kind of fumbling through that clearing, weren't they? They weren't exactly in good order.
No. Well, they were. I think again the Gloucesters are playing the enemy as well.
Must be conscripts.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that's
they were
it.
told to ham it up as much as they could.
Well,
they done another set of uniforms to hire.
Yeah. Well, they done their job because they got the motor battalion to dismount, which is really good drills. So I think we'll watch the last little bit.
Okay.
And the soldier? He's still loyal, disciplined, courageous, and bloody-minded. He's still taken for granted, often misunderstood, and sometimes unpopular. But he's always there when you need him. And if necessary, he'll die for you.
I have made for you a song. It may be right or wrong, but only you can tell me if it's true. I have tried to explain both your pleasure and your pain. And Thomas, here's my best respects to you. For there'll surely come a day when they'll give you all your pay and treat you as a Christian ought to do. So until that day comes round, heaven keep you safe and sound. And Thomas, here's my best respects to you.
So there we are. The end scene there, capped with reading a rendition of Tommy Atkins by Rudyard Kipling, which is really sets a nice end somber tone to the film there.
I think it does. Yeah, I mean, I think that poem resonates down the years, doesn't it? And it sort of rings true today. When the majority of the public are so disconnected from the armed forces because it's such a small armed forces compared to its Second World War strength, or even its 1950s or 60s strength, that they don't really understand the military, and the only time they see them in public is helping with floods or disaster relief, and now obviously because of COVID, Nightingale hospitals and testing and all that sort of thing, and then they disappear again. And I think if you spoke to the people in Liverpool who had come face to face with those soldiers who were helping with the testing, they'd all say, "Oh, we didn't know, the army were like that. They're quite nice people, and we had a good chat with them." And it brings the humanity. Whereas if you're, you set up a barrier by being in uniform, and because of the security situation we've been in ever since Northern Ireland, everything's behind the barbed wire. In the old days, you used to be able to drive through army camps. They're now highly protected and highly secretive because of security. So I think that poem says it all, really. It's the lack of understanding and connection with this country's armed forces, which is very sad. And it's not the armed forces making, it's purely because society has moved on and the armed forces have shrunk. And how many people have relatives serving these days? It's a minority, or have fathers or cousins or brothers or sisters. Whereas I suppose when I was brought up, in the 1960s, national service had only just ended. Everybody knew somebody who'd been in the army, the navy, or the RAF. It was just the norm. I
just think that when the line where it says, "Oh, we'll die for you," it's very they are prepared to lay their lives down, and that's something that is sort of also not forgotten, obviously, today. But it's very powerful wording now. I commend the scriptwriter for including those lines, because it really caps off the movie in such a sort of wow, not to choke you up, but you feel quite proud of the forces at the end there, in a way that possibly I don't think other movies have sort of captured in the right tone, because you've seen the British Army go from Blenheim to current day. You understand a little bit better of where we came from and where we are. I think that's how it, for me, at least that's what I get from the end there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think, let's, in historical context, 1985, 3 years after the Falklands, that was the first sort of war fought in the public gaze, with daily updates and broadcasts on the news. That was highly, highly unusual. Whereas, previous campaigns, Korea, Malaya, Aden, Borneo, none of that had been live reporting. And then from that point onwards, we move into a whole series of conflicts, in the former Yugoslavia, the two wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, which is, covered to within an inch of its life. And so, this film was made at a time when that was just beginning to happen. But the army, as an army, had been trained to fight a conventional war against the Soviet Union. But we suddenly had to switch tack to being, peacekeepers in the former Yugoslavia, and then, on the offensive in Iraq, fighting a proper war, but against a very different enemy, not the enemy we've been trained to fight against. So, what I think is particularly valuable about this film is it's a snapshot in time of where the British Army were at that time, and then, just thinking a few years after that film was made, Glasnost, Perestroika, Yeltsin, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and all that was coming, down the line, and none of that was a reality at the time. So, contextually, it's important to remember where that, where we stand in 1985.
I really enjoyed that sort of transition between the 1985 wounded soldier through to the 1704 wounded soldier, where it's the same sort of like shot, it's the same sort of resonance that's mirrored down the ages of saying, these are men that put it all on the line, and they're willing to do that because it's their profession. And it's that unbroken link of professionalism and the mindset of being a soldier that remains, that link back through 3 centuries plus of soldiering.
Absolutely.
That's the Unbroken Line, isn't it? That's the film.
That's exactly what it's all about. And I think, as I think I said earlier, if you decided to make that film today, you would get exactly the same resonance, but you just update it to where we are today. And, particularly 2 or 3 years ago with Afghanistan going on, that would have been particularly poignant. And, soldiers at the end of the day have a job to do, and they do that job on behalf of, their political masters. And, Afghanistan is a difficult, contentious subject for lots of people to talk about, and it's not the time to go into it here, but regardless of whether it was right or wrong, soldiers have no choice in the matter. they've got to do their duty, and you know, ultimately a lot of them lost their lives, which is, you know, going back to what you were saying earlier, is you know, bottom line.
So I think on that note, I think we should say a big thank you to David and Matt for appearing in this video. I hope that we learnt a lot. I certainly did. Some fantastic snippets there. And, you know, David's career is amazing. You know, please follow him on Twitter. Follow Matt at the Armourers Bench on Twitter as well, and YouTube. Matt will be producing his own little PIAT analysis from this video over on his channel soon. So please look out for that. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Drop a like and hit that notification bell. And thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, you. Robbie. Great. Good talking to you.
No problem. My pleasure.